Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. For those of you who listen to me on the radio, know that I am fascinated and disgusted by Greta Thunberg. But what fascinates me about her is this meteoric rise from just somebody, a lone girl, a single girl that was protesting in front of the Swedish parliament to suddenly she's all over, she's in front of the United Nations, for Pete's sake. And then she's in Denver, Colorado. She's traveling all over the country. Does nobody ever wonder why and how that happened? I know in this age of social media that almost anything can go viral, and there's not always a causal link back to any one thing that you can say, that's what made it go viral. Well, I've been wondering about Greta Thunberg. What made her go viral? She's a major machine, and she is everywhere. How did she get there? Well, behind her is a PR machine, a political machine that is controlled by major international actors and backed by, of course, major money. That PR machine allowed her to make the covers of magazines, become the subject of thousands of news articles, being photographed everywhere, standing next to world leaders, giving speeches at places, like I said, like the United Nations or in Denver, Colorado. And all of a sudden, boom, nobody ever asks, because the media doesn't care. Because what does the media care? Oh, we got this little 16-year-old girl, however old she is now. We got this little 16-year-old girl that we can put on the airwaves, and we can talk about, oh, look, she's so brave, and she's talking about the end of civilization, and yada, yada, yada. It drives me nuts. I need to point out that I am indeed a climate activist. Because I believe the climate changes. It's not my field of expertise. I don't sit down and analyze data regarding climate change. I believe that there may be, but I also believe there probably isn't, any correlation between human activity and what the climate does. And if there is a correlation, or if there's even some causation between the climate and what mankind does, I firmly believe that our effect on the climate is so infinitesimal as to be negligible or irrelevant. What's my expertise? Law. And I would think I've got some expertise in media and politics. So how is it that Greta Thunberg rises to international prominence? I think it's a clear case of what I call agenda setting. And what do I mean by agenda setting? Agenda setting is the creation of public awareness and concern of particular issues by the news media. Agenda setting describes the way the media tries to influence viewers. It describes the way the media establishes a hierarchy of news prevalence. You've heard me talk about how in the newsrooms around the country, television or newspapers, doesn't make any difference, although newspapers are kind of going by the wayside. That in the newsroom, in the television stations around particularly in New York, and major cities, the producers and the reporters and the anchors all start talking in the morning. And they start looking, what do we think is going to be the big story of the day? At noon, they start talking about what is the big story of the day. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're now whittling it down to, okay, these are the big stories of the day. These are the priorities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to have a reporter just do this story. We're only going to have the anchor do this story. They start putting together the 22 minutes that exists in a 30-minute newscast. That's agenda setting. Now, if you ask them, that may be the mechanics of what they do, but they don't call it agenda setting. Some people call it narrative, setting the narrative. I don't care whether you call it agenda setting or setting the narrative, but the logistics of how they do it is the same. And I'll tell you the other thing that goes on. throughout the day, particularly on cable news channels, every cable news outlet has a room where there are nothing but people monitoring every other cable news channel because they all feed off each other. Now let's talk about those cable news channels themselves. They're owned by a handful of mega corporations. It makes it very easy for the media elite to saturate the entire world with one specific message. And I'm not saying that that there's some sort of conspiracy. I don't have a tinfoil hat on. But when you look at their political leanings, when you look at what they're trying to do, drive viewership, drive clicks, drive earbuds, whatever it is they're trying to drive, pretty soon all of that begins to funnel into pretty much the same stories. And if you don't believe me about that, I'd challenge you to do something someday. Watch CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell. Watch it live. But at the same time, set your Xfinity Comcast DVR to record ABC World News Tonight and the NBC Nightly News. And as soon as you finish with CBS Evening News, don't go eat dinner, don't go anything else. Watch the next one, and then watch the next one. 66 minutes of your time. Sit and watch one after the other. And then come back and tell me, yeah, you're right, Michael. It is. It may not be conspiratorial, but it's pretty much the same. And here's the other thing you should notice. Even if the stories aren't the same, notice the structure. Because every one of those evening news shows, the network news, tries to end on a story that is designed to bring tears to your eyes or to make you feel good about something. It's all part of the narrative. It's all part of what I'm calling agenda setting. And mass media programming is very effective on those who do not develop an acute sense of critical thinking, what I call the drive-by consumers of news. Well, the phenomenon of Greta Thunberg was custom-made to cater to that very demographic. That's why she got to where she is. But how did it start? Well, her father's an actor. Her grandfather's an actor. Her mother is a famous opera singer who became a celebrity. So they already have ties to Carl VI. I think it's Carl VI. I'd have to go back and look. Gustav of Sweden. So they've got the media ties. They got the political ties. Back in 2017, her mother won the WWF Environmental Hero Award for her involvement in the climate issue for the past several years. And then a year later, bingo, her 16-year-old daughter is seen protesting in front of the Swedish parliament. It was the perfect storm starting right there. Now we go back to August 20, 2018. That's when Greta Thunberg sat in front of the Swedish parliament with a sign that said, "School strike for the climate." A mere 4 days later, the book Scenes from the Heart was published by her mother. You see the trend here? Written as a family autobiography, that book written by her mother, Scenes from the Heart, discusses a lot of issues such as Greta's Asperger's syndrome. Yes, she's on the autism spectrum. The mother describes Greta as a superpower. Now, if your mother's going around writing a book in which she talks about your Asperger's syndrome and that you have some sort of superpower, she even said in the book that Greta can actually see carbon dioxide emanating from vehicles and buildings. Okay, that's crazy town. Now let's go back to that first day of that first strike. A picture of Greta was published on the Facebook page of We Don't Have Time. That's a Facebook page that is a social network for climate change. The page, interestingly, is managed by Ingmar Rentzhog, who is a specialist in financial marketing. Renshag is also chairman of the Global Utman Board, a think tank that, quote, promotes sustainable development within social, economic, and environmental dimensions. Oh, so now we've got the familial ties, we've got the political ties, and now we have the financial ties. It is indeed a perfect storm. During all of these events, the school strike for the climate, all of that, there was a woman often spotted. She was even here in Denver, advising Greta, Louisa Marie Neubauer. Neubauer is a member of the One Campaign. That's an organization managed by Bill Gates and Bono. It's heavily funded by the Open Society Foundation, George Soros. If you go to the Associated Press, they have, their fact-checking site, there's an article with the bizarre title, Climate Activist Greta Thunberg Does Not Have Handler Assets, and that Louisa Marie Neubauer does not serve as Greta's handler. But then it went on, the Associated Press, after saying that, goes on and admits that Neubauer is linked with the Open Society Foundation. The AP wrote, according to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation website, the One Campaign, originated in conversations between Bill Gates and Bono back in the early 2000s about the need to better inform Americans about extreme poverty around the world. The One Campaign, according to the AP, has ties to Soros, founder and chairman of Open Society Foundations, which works to build democracies, not republics, democracies. The AP continues, Brooke Havlick, a communications officer with the Open Society Foundations, told the AP that the organization has given $10 million to the One Campaign since 2011. Now, think about the connections. And we wonder how Greta Thunberg rose to such prominence. She skyrocketed. She gave speeches at TED Talks. Do you know how many times I've tried to get on to do a TED Talk about resilience? If any of you out there have connections to TED Talk, talk to me. She's spoken to the European Union Parliament. She's spoken to the United Nations. She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. She's met the Pope. You see, that's the agenda setting. And that's how, when you put all of these things together, you soon begin to understand that if, or when, I talk about drive-by consumers of news, they don't know, nor I think in many cases do they care about, oh, I wonder how that little girl ended up on national television. I do, because I know this. Nothing is coincidental. Oh, yes, things occasionally go viral. But for her to reach the prominence that she reached, it had to be more than a picture sitting in front of the Swedish parliament. And indeed, it was a lot more. From a lone girl protesting in front of that parliament building, she turned into a figure of, dare I say, martyrdom. Now, I would imagine that a lot of people think that Greta is merely a pawn, that she's controlled by powerful people, big money, trying to provide us or promote a specific agenda. Well, the agenda is not merely about climate change. It is about climate change, but through a very specific lens. That role was defined by Greta herself during a speech at the World Economic Forum. She's been to Davos. I forgot to include Davos. Yes. She said, adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. Oh, she's got handlers. Because now we've gone from hope and change kind of stuff to fear and panic. Two words that if you can convince people to be fearful or to panic, that causes people to make hasty decisions, irrational decisions that are based on negative emotions. And the fear and panic that is being thoroughly ingrained into young people is creating a generation that is convinced that the world is on the eve of destruction. And she's the face of that massive push. It's not by accident. It's on purpose. Now, I don't know. I've never met the girl. I tried to get her on the radio program, and of course her handlers wouldn't let her. She really might be genuinely concerned about climate change because she's only 16 years old. What does she know? But I'm telling you, those behind her have a much darker agenda. They want to create an entire generation of kids that are riddled with anxiety and depression. That gives the elite carte blanche for drastic measures. Tax hikes, the loss of personal freedom, the destruction of individual liberty. And let's not forget the main goal of all of it, the creation, now this may sound conspiratorial to some people, the creation of a world government, ruled by the world elite, all in the name of fighting climate change. So I think that any person who dares to take a critical look at Greta Thunberg is immediately faced with the same backlash. How dare you, Michael Brown, bully this little autistic girl? Oh my gosh, she's got Asperger's syndrome. You're a climate denier. You're just an awful human being. You know, everything I talked about really wasn't about Greta. Everything that I talked about was the creation of Greta, the agenda, the narrative setting, the agenda setting. And now you know the facts. Or as Paul Harvey used to say, now you know the rest of the story. Do me a favor, share this podcast on iTunes and on the iHeart app, both. Don't go away, listen to me. Do not hang up. On the iHeart app and on iTunes, there's a place to copy the link. Copy the link, put it on your Facebook page, on your Twitter account, email it to friends or family. Help me share the podcast. And be sure and do that exercise too. I challenge you tonight, set your DVR up. Maybe you don't get home in time, so set it up for the next night. Watch one evening news program live while you're recording the other two evening news programs. Watch for similar content. Watch for similar format. Watch for similar types of stories. And you'll see that when I talk about agenda setting or narratives vis-a-vis the mainstream media, you'll go, yeah, Michael Brown, he knows what he's talking about. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.